Kevin Barnicle, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm thrilled to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Govindh. I'm thrilled to be here.
You said something off the start that I'm not sure everybody can see on there. I know they can. Eventually, they'll be able to see it over my shoulder and over in their corner. You're actually the first guest that's ever been on Paper Napkin that has a statue behind them, just like me. And your story is equally as awkward and shunned by our wives as the statues are forced into a remote corner of our homes.
Yeah, so I have, if you can see it or not, so you have a statue of a Yeti or a Bigfoot. I got probably I'll turn the camera here when I'm done. But pretty funny, when I was running my business, we did some online commercials, and in the commercials, there was a Yeti. And I, won't bore you with all the details. I was trying to stand out, what have you. And my kids were little. They were, at the time those commercials came out, they're probably like 6 and 4 or something. And people would ask them, "Hey, what does your dad's company do?" They're like, "We have no clue, but he has Yetis in his commercials." And they just love that there was a Yeti. I don't know how many Yeti presents I've gotten over the years, but anyways, they saw this statue in Sky Mall magazine, if anyone remembers that. And they thought it was hilarious. And my wife bought it for me, and we had it in our office. And then, anyways, once I exited that business, and that all everything. There were certain mementos I wanted to keep. There's a bell also on the wall that was kind of our sales bell whenever we get a new deal. But the Yeti has stayed. But my wife's an interior designer, and it is tucked away in the corner in my office where no one can see it. But yeah, it's great. And I heard all about yours as well.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah, almost the same story, except for it wasn't a gift, but yeah, it's shunned in the corner. I love it, but it's shunned in the corner. But it's interesting you said, right, trying to stand out, and your napkin. Nice segue right into your napkin, which says, "Look at what everyone else is doing and do the opposite." Why did you share that with me?
Yeah, so I it might be little bit long-winded response, but it's the best career advice I've ever received. So I received it when I was about 25, 26. My wife and I had gotten engaged. My parents had a place in Naples, Florida, and to kind of do like a celebration getaway thing, we did a surprise, right? I surprised her with a visit down to our condo. We were there for 3 or 4 days, and there was a family down there that she had nannied in college. So they had moved from kind of Minnesota, where she went to school, to Naples, Florida. She was very close with the kids. I think they had like 5 kids, and very close with the family. Obviously, she used to nanny them during the summers and during the school year. So she said, "Hey, would you mind if we went and visit them?" And I'm like, "Sure." So they give us their address. We show up to this house. We have no idea what we're showing up to, right? This is before Zillow, where you can kind of look up the house you're going to. And we show up, and it's like lifestyles of the rich and famous. It's got to be a 10 to $15 million house. Way back, this is 25 years ago, and I'm like, "What is this?" It's like a gated community. It's amazing, and already you're like, "Whoa, this is kind of intimidating." Walk in, she's saying hi to the kids, saying hi to the couple, and the guy just couldn't be any more impressive, any nicer. Seems like a great dad, seems like a great husband. He's very humble, and we're looking around this house, and it's just, I'm like, "Man, you got to give me a tour." And he's giving me a tour, and he's got like Picasso's, and I'm like, and he's just very kind of humble about it all, and I'm like, "I would love if you could give me some advice." And that was his advice to me. He said, "Look at what everyone else is doing and do the opposite." And I've always been kind of a rebellious, typical kind of entrepreneur, contrarian point of view. So it resonated with me in general. But I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he was in commercial real estate. He had been a broker. I can't remember what firm, and been very successful. And he kind of felt, like he needed to go down an entrepreneurial path. And he went down an entrepreneurial path and started his own business, going against the norm, what everyone else was doing. And then when he started his business, they weren't doing great in the beginning. I can't remember exactly all the details. It was quite some time ago, but he said, we weren't doing great. And then I was like, what if I just tried the opposite? Because I'm kind of failing, and see how that goes. And they just took off. And, the guy was very successful, kind of entrepreneur of the year award. And he was like, whenever I've really been at a crossroads, I've looked at that. Let's just try the opposite and see how it goes, especially if you're not succeeding, obviously. So I was kind of at a crossroads in my own career, not a crossroads, but I was about 26 years old. I was ambitious. I was always in sales, and I was kind of in a comfortable sales job. and I had been kind of being recruited by a company that was in my space. I was always in tech sales, and I was a little nervous about taking the job, and just because I was kind of in a safe kind of sales job. People weren't leaving that job, and everyone's telling me, don't do it, don't go work for that company. It was kind of a much more of a boiler room kind of environment. But I was like, I'm ambitious. I kind of want to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. I want to take a chance. And then went to that company, and it went really well. And I could, I can kind of lead you down the path, but I'll stop there for a second on, there's been so many crossroads in my life, and I could tell you how it all led to starting the business and even in the business, where that advice has just been so instrumental in my own success. And I think it's something that I would like, just to, share with the listeners, that to kind of think about that, especially if you're not having success.
So I love how how you started off, though, that you were obviously taken aback by not the material success alone. It was his humility
Yes.
and the man he was, and that motivated you to ask for advice. But what's really interesting is you contrasted that very next sentence with the fact that you say, I was entrepreneurial, a bit of a rule breaker, didn't really listen to a lot of people, but you asked for advice. You sort of did something that was out of character. Was that something you did all the time, or was this like just this
Yeah, no, actually,
moment?
it was. I don't know what that is about me, and I do think that that's a particular strength of me. Is I've always been pretty humble, and looked for people that were having success, and going out of my way to ask them what they did different, how they did. I've read a lot of books from successful people too, but like I remember early, I had my first job out of college was Dell computer, and I was inside sales guy, and they would like list the leaderboard, of like the most successful people, and I would always email them the top 5 and say, can I take you out to lunch, can I pick your brain, can I please ask you some questions, because I was just trying to learn. And I've done that my whole career. I did that when I was running my business. I did it before I just decided to make the leap of my business. I've always tried to learn from others. And then now I'm at a phase where I've succeeded in my own career. Now I'm trying to pay it forward, right, and pay it back. And that's why I thought was one of the coolest things about your podcast, is that there's that definitely vibe of like giving back and sharing what you've learned. A lot of the episodes that I've learned, you could tell that's what the entrepreneur's goal was. So, but yeah, I absolutely have sought that out my whole career. And I still, frankly, like, I'm trying to figure out golf currently. I'll take some of the best golf. Can we go play around? Can I just pick your brain? And I find that most people, and I know one of your recent guests said the same thing, most people are very willing to share, right? And if you're really willing to listen, you've got to be willing to listen, right? You can't just be like, hey, tell me about it, and then talking about yourself. You're like, shut up, listen to them, and then take it all in. You don't need to try to impress them. Just take it in and ask questions.
Right on. I really like that, because some people will see that napkin and look at what everybody else is doing and do the opposite. It may sound like you're just a rebel without a pause. That's not what you're saying. You're a rebel with a purpose. You're a
Yes,
rebel with a vision, and learning from the people, picking up the tire that somebody else has figured out, and using that wheel and using that tire, using the tools that people have already developed. That's not what you're talking about. And the other thing that I think is really important about, I want to make sure I didn't miss that first before
no,
I
you
move
got
on.
it correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So then the next part is, I think is really interesting, is you say, he said something like, try the opposite and see how it goes. Like, he was struggling. He
Hmm.
didn't quit the business, didn't quit the objective, didn't quit the vision, but quit the approach for a
Exactly.
different way. And that's what I think is hidden. The hidden wisdom in this napkin isn't give up on your dreams and try the opposite. It's give up on your approach. Like, you don't know how,
100%.
so find another way, right?
Exactly. There's always a path, right? That's the point. And especially in an entrepreneurial venture, you run your own business as well. It's like most things don't work, right? It's hard to find things that work. So just try and try and try until you find something that works, and then keep doing it. I used to say that at my company all the time, like, look, find the things that work and keep doing it. If it's not working, pivot, try something different. And sometimes you'll make little tweaks, right? Little tweaks, nothing's working, nothing's working. And then it's like where the advice has been sunken in my life, it's like, well, let's try the complete opposite. If we were doing, product A, let's just try doing the complete opposite. Like, one example is like early in my sales career, I actually went to that company that I talked about, and they're like, look, you got 4 products to sell, and 90% of your quota is going to come from product A. And then you got B, C, and D. And product B actually meant, I'm trying to sell product A. They put me in kind of a crappy sales territory. I was brand new, not a lot of existing customers. And I realized, well, that's not really working. But product B is actually a much better fit for the kind of territory that I have. There's way more customers, way more opportunity. And I just went, I'm not going to even try to sell product A. I'm just going to try to sell product B. And it just took off, right? So it wasn't like I'm going to give up this sales job that I just took or anything. I'm just going to try a different approach. Like you said, like the path less traveled, and see if it works. And you know what? I've had plenty of ideas that have not worked. And guess what? I changed those as well. But what the point is try, if you're not having success, try the opposite, see how it goes. It might be the exact thing that the market is needed, that you've needed, that fits your personality, whatever it is, to kind of take you to success. And it's proven time and time and time again true for me. The path less traveled, to your point, right? It's not switching, it's the path less traveled.
Well, and I think there's something else there too, right? Like you said, most things don't work. And part of it is because we try to copy from our perspective what somebody else is doing. And we probably are missing something about the sequence. We might get the right idea, but the sequence isn't quite right. And that sequence is where the magic happens. And it might work for them, but it might not work for us. So most things don't work leads you to the fact that you've got to try different things. But trying different things doesn't also mean like that you're manifesting it from a mountaintop. You're actually doing it, right?
Yes.
You're not just putting a toe in the water. When you said a product B might work, you didn't pitch it once and then walk home and say, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to give it some time, right? Absolutely. You got to give it some time. And I think listening to your gut works a lot too. Like, don't just try the opposite if you think this is just completely stupid. You're like, okay, well, how would it work? Why would that actually work? Like actually putting some analysis behind it too, right? It's not just don't just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. It's like, okay, what if we tried the opposite? What would that look like? And just having that conversation. I mean, we developed some own software products at my company, and if things weren't going really well, I would sit down with the engineers and like, I'd say, let's do this. Let's look at the opposite. And they'd be like, you're an idiot kind of thing, and I'd be like, well, let's just humor me. What if we tried it? Like, let's play it out. And then we play it out. And then usually people are like, oh, actually that might work. That might work. And then it's just, just like the whole lean startup methodology, just try, right? Try and then iterate, try, iterate, and keep iterating until you find something that works. And like you talked about, it's that process, figuring out the process. You have to either way put yourself in the customer's shoes, right? Don't look at it from my perspective. I'm not trying to think of, oh, I'm Steve Jobs, I'm coming up with these billion ideas. I'm trying to really get to know the customer and then figure out where their pain points are and obviously solve those pain points. But that's part of that process of coming up with the opposite is, okay, well, this isn't working. Maybe we don't understand their process correctly, right? We haven't put ourselves in their shoes effectively enough. And once you do that, which barely anyone does, by the way, you usually can find those, aha, this is why this isn't working. And let's try this and see how it works. And it never hurts to try, especially in an entrepreneurship. I say this to my kids all the time. Like, you're probably not going to be very good at whatever you do in the beginning, and just try different things and see what works.
Right. And it's that commitment to iteration that's a big part of it. Now, you got this advice early in your career, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
Early on, you were in your early 20s, you got this information, you got this piece. What'd you do with it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think I did with it obviously is leading to my company, right? So I was in Fortune 500 kind of tech sales. And like I said, I was at a couple different crossroads. One where everyone was telling, everyone was kind of staying at the one job, never leaving. People been there 15, 20 years, kind of safe job. I went and did the opposite. I went to this other company that was kind of seen more risky. I go there, they tell me sell product A. It's not working for me. I sell product B. I become salesman of the year. It's going so well. Then they try to get me, like, everyone wants to get into sales management, right? Where you got sales managers making $500,000 to $1 million a year. That's what everyone's path is. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I've seen these, like, my sales manager early on just got fired for no good reason. Like, every single person on his team was over their quota and they still fired him. I'm like, I don't want that. I'm going to do the opposite. I don't want to do that. I'm going to stay a salesperson. Then they changed my job, and I basically was going to have to either go find a new job within the company or something else. And I'm like, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to create my own business. And that was like the biggest piece that really changed my life. And therefore, so, 2 little kids, very successful. I'd won a number of like salesman of the year awards, and I did the opposite. And a lot of people were like, you're crazy to kind of start a business. You have young kids, like, you're going to run out of money. Like, I heard everything. And I was like, no, I'm going to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Started the company. And even when I started the company, I was doing services and product enhancement on the product that I was kind of selling. And a lot of people the company wasn't really focusing on it. Like, you're crazy. You should go work with this other product. And I'm like, no, this is what I know. I'm not going to go. Everyone's kind of leading away from that product. I'm going to lean into the product, and then we take off. And the whole time I would continue to look at these things, like, especially if things weren't going great, right? If things are going great, you kind of keep doing the same. But we had a bunch of times where things were dipping. And even, the biggest thing is, so Microsoft kind of got into our space, and their products they acquired a company. I was in the legal technology space, so like helping companies deal with lawsuits. And that was a really pretty mature market. There was 10 or 15 years of real kind of, very specific requirements. Microsoft kind of gets into the game. And I knew, just being Microsoft, that eventually they're going to take this over. But in the beginning, their products weren't very good. They didn't really understand them. And there's probably 30 or 40 companies kind of in my space. We're kind of a niche space. They're all like, we're ignoring Microsoft. Their products stink. They don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, no, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to go all in with Microsoft, because we're a small company. We're about 25 people. They're going to bring us into all these companies. We'll figure out how to make these products work for our customers. And that could be process in their products. Anyways, we do that. We're the opposite, and we just take off. And our Microsoft revenue starts doubling, quarter over quarter. And then like a year or two later, now all these big companies, like, publicly traded companies, large 8,000 person companies, they're trying to get into the game. And because we had done the opposite, we went all in, we were light years ahead of us. And I had 10 companies trying to buy us. And eventually one did. And, even when we got acquired, and I sold majority of the business, was there for 3.5 years, and then sold them the rest. Even when I was in that company, I was doing a lot of the opposite of what these other acquisitions had done and failed. I was like, well, I'm not going to do any of that. And so anyways, I think that's what I've done with it, right? I've used this so much in my life that even when I was running the company, we had an office, it was the first thing that people saw on my wall. So right inscribed in my wall, right by the light switch, said, look what everyone else is doing and do the opposite. That's how much it's meant to me. And, frankly, I'm going to use being on this podcast as an opportunity to send this to that entrepreneur that gave me that advice, because I haven't even talked to him since, which is kind of crazy.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So it's what a powerful thing. I mean, the fact that you've done this and you've made this part of your life. What happens in a team when the leader is saying, hey, do the opposite and just try it. Do the opposite and try it. What happens because you were part of a team that was like, sit still, be quiet, do as you're told, do what you're doing. And you came in with a totally different philosophy, right? Do the opposite. Let's see it. Let's try it.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple
What
things.
happens to your team in that environment?
Yeah, I think a couple things. It recruits people like you, because if they know that and you talk about it, it's a very entrepreneurial kind of environment. They will try new things without asking their permission, which is great. I would say that's more the kind of the sales team kind of mentality. And then I would say there are some challenges with it too. Like I just mentioned, like when we were a pretty healthy business, we're about 10 million in revenue and doing well. But the two products we were doing a lot of services, managed services and kind of product enhancements to, they were kind of going down. And then I go, hey, we're going to try the opposite. We're going to go all into Microsoft. I got a lot of resistance from my engineering team. They're like, They said the same thing all these competitors were saying. Their products stink. They don't know what they're doing, blah, blah. And then I was really pushing them out of the comfort zone. And like myself, a lot of them were analytical. And I said, well, stop. Let's talk about what if we did do the opposite? Like what could go right in these scenarios? So I think it definitely fosters an environment where people are more risk taking, and which is a good thing. Not careless risk, calculated risk, but it's okay. And it's also like a culture of it's okay to fail. Like I'm not gonna get mad at you if you fail as long as you tried. Like that's all I care about. Like I even said it to my sons, last night in played a soccer game, and he missed a goal that he felt like he should get, and it was right at the end of the game, and he was so upset. And I'm like, you know what, dude, I don't care that you missed the goal. You tried, you gave it a shot. It's okay if you miss. The problem is not trying, right? So I think that's the culture it creates, is if you give them that opportunity to try something, even if it fails, I think it empowers them too, and then they'll run through walls for you, and for your customers, more importantly, frankly.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate safety. You said something that I think a lot of people say, and look, you wrote a book on starting up business. I know you're passionate about entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial space. I'm going to ask you a question because a lot of people say this, but I'm interested in your perspective. What is an entrepreneurial environment? People come to like there are people in the world
Hmm.
that, and you said this, right? You're going to attract people who are like you. They're going to want to be in an entrepreneurial environment. And I think people say these things without really knowing what it means. So I'm going to put it to you. What is an entrepreneurial?
Freedom. That's what it is to me, and that's always was my own goal, right? I actually named my company Control because I wanted to control my future. And there was a second meaning for our customers, and I won't get into that, but it's freedom, right? And I used to tell that to people, like, look, we want people. When I was interviewing them, I'd say we want people that are leaders and want the opportunity that maybe they've never had. um, the ability to create whatever you're looking for. We're looking for leaders, and if we have to manage you, we're going to manage you out of the business, but I'm going to give you freedom. I'm going to give you freedom to do what you want. I'm going to, like, certainly if you're going off the rails, we're going to have a conversation about, but it's freedom. And that's something that's always driven me personally in my personal life. Kind of a control freak. I've always wanted freedom. I don't like people telling me what to do. And I would tell that to my employees, like, look, I'm not the boss. The customer's the boss. The paychecks run through the company and me, and I'm the leader of the team, but I play a role. I'm not, and if you're on the phone with a customer and I call you, you stay on the call with them. Don't pick it up for me. So anyways, I would give people freedom, and some really cool things happen. Whether one of my favorite things early on with giving people freedom is we had a guy who worked for, Nationwide Insurance, and he'd been there for 25 years. And he was a great, brilliant engineer. He wanted to work out of his house. He didn't like traveling an hour to work every day. And I recruited him, and he was scared to go to this startup. But I was like, look, man, I will give you the freedom to work out of your house. You can work remote, you can do whatever, and you're going to run the division, and I'm going to stay out of your way because you know that way better than I do. I'm going over here, you're over here. I'm going to give you the freedom. Like a year in, I call him and he's like, "Oh, I'm in Arizona." I'm like, "Oh, you're working remote. You're visiting family." He's like, "No, I've been here for 3 months." I'm like, "Huh?" He's like, "It's always been a dream of mine to live somewhere else in like the winter or the summer. I can't remember what the period of time was." And he's like, "I want to thank you for that, giving me this opportunity, giving me the freedom to do that." And I was like, "Wow, how cool is that?" And because I created this environment of freedom, like that gave him that opportunity. And he was one of our best employees. He'd get on a plane if he needed to, right? And I don't know, that's a no long-winded answer, but being an entrepreneur environment is giving people freedom, whatever that means to them. And it could mean freedom in their job, freedom in their work-life balance, and it can mean a lot of different things. But that's what I think it means, at least.
Yeah, but it's not like freedom to not show up and
No,
not
you
do
got to
things.
work.
So this is where I think people get mixed up, and I think this is really powerful embedded in what you just said. It felt like you were really aligned with him on why you do what you do, what value you have to the customer, and that the customer is the boss. Your purpose, cause, belief was really well aligned.
Yes.
What product you were delivering was also well aligned. Like, you knew what the customer had to love it.
Yes.
How was completely up to him.
That's a great way to put it.
So, right? So it's the freedom of how. It's the
Absolutely.
freedom of how that people want when they come to an entrepreneurial organization. But people always think that there's a catch. Oh, freedom of how, but you're going to punish me if I try something innovative and it doesn't work. You're saying something opposite. You're actually saying you're giving them safety to create and invent. And what happened to your company when you did that?
Great. I mean, I didn't have to, that was my whole thing. I don't want to manage people. Like, go and do your thing, and it created a real sense of loyalty in the company. We did not have a lot of people leave. And I think that's a big ingredient of running a successful business, especially if you're small, is keeping that team intact and that momentum. Right. And it, it was great. And people felt like the company get-togethers were so open, and like, it wasn't a family, it was a team, but it was a very successful team. And we had a lot of respect for each other, because like, and we would highlight the things like, oh, Chris, we were doing this, Chris came in and now we're doing this and it's so much better. Right. And I would have, like, I remember one of the early kind of main CTO technical guys came in the company. Like, there was all these tools that we're using, and he's like, man, these are all garbage, we need to do something better. I go, great, run with it. It's on your table. And then he did all these things, and he was like, that was so cool to him, right? He would do it on his off hours. During the day, he's working with clients and building products or company. But at like nighttime and on the weekends, he would do these things because it was cool to him. He enjoyed it, our ticketing system for like support tickets for a client, like that stuff. He geeked out on it and he loved it. And creating that, I think you really well articulated. I don't know if I ever thought it that way, but it was the how, right? I was like, I'm going to stay out of your way. And I would also say, stay out of my way. Like, I'm sales and marketing. I'm working with the customers, product development. Like, you can come over my way, but like, I'm leading that. So get out of my way. But I will give this to you. That is your environment, and you will run that. I will have nothing to do with it, and I will stay out of your way. And they knew that, right? And that was like their baby. And I would have them present that area. I'd be like, I was the leader, that a VP of sales. He would do all the sales stuff. Then the COO would talk about all the internal stuff. And then the CTO would talk about all the tech stuff. And I was like, I would just shut up and I wouldn't input, my thoughts. I would, accentuate if I felt like there was a point that needed to be accentuated or whatever. But it was really like, they're the leader. They're the CEO of that, division. I would say, you're the CEO of the customers to my engineers. I'm like, you're the CEO. You make the decision. You don't have to come to me and say, do we need to give them an extra 10 hours of support for free because they're upset because we screwed something up? Just give it to them. You make the decision. So I found it was really a successful approach for us.
I love that. And there's a different commitment that you get from people when they're, and you talked about your CTO and the tool set that they put into place. There's a commitment level that's different from your people when they're putting their ideas into place
100%.
Versus just going through the dogma of your doctrine. It's totally different. And look, everybody's listening and they may not know Kevin's story, but you're a top 1,000 fastest growing company in the United States. You grew 400% in revenue and sold the company twice.
Yep.
Right. Like, so let's also put in context that the prize inside is that you get uncommon growth with this uncommon level of focus to letting people have the freedom of how. There's a value to that.
Absolutely. I love that. The freedom of how. That's great. I think you need to write that book.
Yeah. Well, I just circled it down here. So, I love that you talk about trying and that's all you care about, but I really want people to understand that trying means taking the shot, missing the shot, like seeing it all the way through to, in your son's case, when he took the shot and missed, it's going all the way there and feeling the defeat, that's part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I also said, I'm like, look, you put yourself in the right position, right? You follow the ball where it was going. You put yourself in the right position. You angled it. You hustled all the way down the field, right? You put yourself in that position. It's okay that you missed the shot because all that work leading up to that, that's the important stuff. You're showing up at practice. You're hustling in the game. You're fighting, right? It's okay that you missed the shot because you did all that preparation. I think that's what a lot of people they worry about the shot, right? Did I make it? Did I miss it? No. It's about the process and putting yourself there because you keep doing that, you're going to have an opportunity to keep making those shots. And guess what? One of those times it's going to go in, right? And that's just how life works, right? You put in the work, you put in the process. It doesn't always work, but it's going to work at some point. And if you're doing the right things, but yeah, I think hopefully that answered the question, but yeah.
Yeah, it totally does. The other thing that I think people we need to talk about a little bit is you started this. This is not something in people who are listening and not watching. Kevin, you're a young guy. You exited these companies how long ago?
It's been about 4 years now.
So about 4 years. So uh, since about 45, right? I think you
Yep.
told me since about 45, you've been out of these business and you said retired slash rewired since that time. And I think one of the things that people really need to understand, I say this often. I say that I'm never going to retire, and you claimed the retirement pretty strongly. You said I retired at 45, but here we are on a podcast talking business, talking growth, talking ideas. Retired doesn't mean that your feet's up in the sand 24/7. You're still doing stuff, right?
Oh yeah, nonstop. I mean, so I get a lot of questions about it. It was a goal of mine to be retired young, and financially independent, retire early. The whole FIRE movement, people call it. There's another thing around rewirement, around putting yourself in a position where you can do whatever you want, and that was my goal. And it kind of comes back to my thing I talked about earlier: freedom. I know life is short. I had enough death in my childhood and kind of grief around that I'm like, life is short. I want to make sure that I live mine to the fullest. And the only way I felt like I could do that is if I wasn't fully charged. And obviously finances come into that. But yeah, so I've been retired for 4 years. I'm proud of that fact. I do talk about it. Some of my friends give me a lot of grief about it, but I'm so busy. I've always, and right now what I'm doing is like chasing childhood dreams. It's another way of coming up with product approaches, right? Or starting up a business. Think about the stuff you thought about as a kid and that you just very passionate about, and life got in the way and you never were able to do, right? So I always wanted to write a book. I wrote a book. It's about entrepreneurship, starting a business, a lot of my journeys in it. But even with the book, I took the opposite approach. I read a lot. I'm an avid reader. I don't even know how many hundreds of business books I've read, but I've read a lot. And I was like, what could I do that would be different or unique or the opposite? And obviously, I knew what worked on me and what I felt were good. But one thing that I saw in the business book world was there's not a lot of humor. There's very few with humor. So I feel like I'm a pretty funny guy when I want to be. So I decided I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to make this thing silly almost, with a lot of lessons. But so I write this book and you don't know how it's going to be received. And the thing is kicking butt. It's on Amazon called The Blueprint Starting a Successful Business. But I read all the reviews. It's only been out for like 8 months. It's got like 400 reviews on Amazon. It's doing really good. It was up for a couple awards. It came in second in one of them, but whatever. And they all talk about the humor element because I did the opposite, right? I took a chance and I'm not doing it to make money or anything like that or even any ego driven purposes. It really was giving back and all the entrepreneurs that had given to me. And I feel like I had something to say. But yeah, I mean, I continued to do that in my life and being retired, quote unquote, rewired. It's giving you the freedom to do what you want, when you want, and who you want with. And running a business is difficult. There was a lot of traveling. My kids were little. I definitely feel like I missed some things. So I wanted to at least give myself the opportunity to kind of not have anything where I have to do and see how that went. So I've done amazing things with my family and we travel quite a bit. And the freedom to do that has been absolutely worth all the sleepless nights, all the waking up in the middle of the night with heart palpitations of running the business. all of those, the stresses of going through and selling a company, which is not easy. Even though I'm quote unquote retired or wired, I never sitting around. I never sit around and watch TV. I have all these hobbies, I have all these interests, and it's being able to have the opportunity to design your own life, which is, that's the goal. That was the goal for me. And entrepreneurship was the path to get to that goal. And that's what I felt. And it proved to be true. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. I love talking to other entrepreneurs. I get excited when I talk to other entrepreneurs because it's just the path.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I can feel the passion and the energy that you have about all of this. And I said this in the green room before we began, that I coach a minor hockey team, and my manager Jimmy Schiavo is 75 years old. He's been retired for I don't know how long. The guy works harder than people who have 9 to 5s, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's out there creating opportunities for the young men who play on our hockey team, and they don't know how lucky they are to have a guy like that.
He wants to do it, right? It doesn't feel like work if it's quote unquote a job, but that's kind of how I felt like writing the book or all these. And I have some rental properties and I sit on some boards or whatever, but those are things I want to do and I enjoy them. It doesn't feel like work, right? So that's probably how he feels. And same thing, like I'm doing all these podcasts, I'm doing all these things because I want to get back to entrepreneurs and I want to teach people like this is the way because of how much it's given me. And that's the beauty of the life he's designed for himself, right? And I honestly, when you told me that story, I'm like, that's so cool. I can see myself doing that. Probably basketball or some different sport because I'm American. But I love that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, it's so great. And I think that there's a lot that, I mean, you're living your freedom of how you're living your life, what you're doing right now. I think that's the recurring theme. And what a gift it was to spend some time with you, Kevin. This was a real joy. And as you know, because you've listened to the show, this is the point where we shout out John Rulin, who was a great friend of the show 11 years ago, before his untimely passing last year. He shared a napkin with us, which was what you appreciates. He started a movement of gratitude around the world, turned into a book, but more importantly, a movement where people thought harder about making sure that people felt the gratitude that they had of the relationships they make and the relationships they build. On that basis, Kevin, who would you like to shout out and show some appreciation to?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second, but I wanted to first off applaud you for doing that. I think it's great to honor folks, and I know we talked about it in the green room too. It's something I didn't mention before, but I actually have a tattoo on my right calf that I got when I was younger. I had a couple of my close friends pass away, and kind of two separate tragic incidences, and my tattoo reminds me of what you're doing right here, and it's an old Irish saying, "Own art, go art," and it stands for from strength to strength. So what it means is basically you've learned something from someone, and then you make it your own and you pass it on. And I feel like that's what you're doing right there. I never really I didn't think about that until just right now, but I thought I would mention that. And that's a lot of what I try to do in my life too, is I try to learn from others, make it my own, and then pass it on, right? Like kind of leave the world better than you found it. So the person that I personally want to thank for, I kind of did a spoiler alert at it earlier, but it is the gentleman who gave me that quote. His name is John Allen. I have not, like I mentioned, I have not talked to him. I thought about this morning. I'm like, God, I can't believe that the guy had made such an indelible mark on my life, and he had no clue, So I'm going to take the opportunity when this comes out to send this to him as a reach out and say thank you. But I would just, it was just he probably doesn't. I'm sure he probably remembers the meeting, but I guarantee he probably doesn't remember even saying that to me. But what an amazing thing that he did for me, and just sharing a little bit about insight into his own brain, and just really, there's hundreds of entrepreneurs that I've met over the years that have just shared their wisdom with me and listening to podcasts, even like yourself. And the one that I listened to this morning was the gentleman talking about getting over the wall, and he just had a lot of wisdom in there. I just think it's and I want to thank you too for having a podcast like that shares these wisdom. And I think it's a really cool concept on something short that you can put on a napkin. I just think it's very clever. And So thank you to you too, and all the entrepreneurs out there who kind of pay it forward. It's a path less traveled, and there is a lot of wisdom there that even non-entrepreneurs can learn about. So to John Allen, thank you, and to all entrepreneurs, including yourself, thank you.
Kevin, that's a beautiful thing. And it just motivates me to say one more thing. It's so important what we give to each other. When we look at each other, when we hear each other's ask for help, and we respond in kindness. And that's what happened when John Allen responded to you. He gave you a comment that he may not remember giving to you, and you engraved it in your wall.
Yeah,
This
right.
is the power of our words and our connection. And it's worth being attentive to that. That's another gift you've given us in this podcast. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.